Welcome back, fellow Common fans, to the Common Fan Podcast. This is your periodic reminder that the Nebraska Cornhuskers are 5-3, tied for first place in the Big Ten West, and playing Michigan State on Saturday with eyes on their first bowl appearance since 2016. It's a great day to be a Common fan. Reminder to follow the podcast on your streaming platform of choice. Follow us on Twitter at CommonFanGBR. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can direct any comments, questions, or smart remarks to commonfangbr@gmail.com. I am TJ Burgle. With me, as always, are Maddie Owens Sr. and Geoff in Lincoln. Boys, how are we doing today?
We're doing great, TJ. Living the dream.
Happy Halloween.
Love to hear that. We're recording this on Halloween, so hopefully all of you fellow Common fans out there have a safe and fun Halloween, and everybody can get their hands on at least some of their kids' candy. We're joined today by National College Football reporter Taylor McGregor. Taylor is a college football and XFL sideline reporter for ESPN, having joined the network in 2019. She also serves as a host for Marquee Sports Network in Chicago, where she is the lead reporter on Cubs games during the MLB season. Taylor, thanks so much for joining the Common fans today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I don't know how long we should wait before telling all the people at home how TJ and I met, because it's a great story.
It is. I mean, we got to jump in now.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. I did the Minnesota-Nebraska game last fall around this time. I believe it was the first weekend in November, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. Good memory.
And it was a noon game. And usually as a reporter who spends a lot of time on the road, a noon game's fantastic because you can leave Saturday night to go back home. And I was originally scheduled to do that. My flight was at 6 and I did the game, thought perfect, I'll get on a flight back to Chicago. Well, I have a lot of Cornhusker fans who are friends, and they convinced me.
Love to hear that. Love to hear that.
Love to hear that.
We're everywhere.
They convinced me to stay in Lincoln that night, and so
Nice.
Ended up the game was over, and I changed my flight to Sunday morning. Stayed in Lincoln, had a fantastic time in Lincoln on Saturday night, which I'm sure we'll get to as well. And then Sunday morning, go to the airport, get on a flight, and I ended up having to actually connect in Denver to get back to Chicago. So the flight that I met TJ on was, we were sitting on the tarmac waiting for our flight to take off from Lincoln to Denver, and there was some sort of issue. We all had to deplane.
Yep.
But in the meantime, TJ and I started talking, and keep in mind, it's early Sunday morning after a night out in Lincoln. I think my hoodie was up. Like, I'm not trying to talk to anybody, but TJ's really nice. Sits down. We start talking. And then he's a Cubs fan. So he finally realizes, wait a second, I think I've seen you on TV. And I'm like, well, this is embarrassing because I look so awful right now on Sunday morning trying to get home that you didn't even really recognize me at first. But so we bonded. I ended up actually getting off the plane, having to drive to Omaha, and then took another flight from Omaha to Chicago because our plane was delayed. And you got back, you live in Oregon, right?
I live in Oregon. Yep.
Yeah, I got back to Oregon, I'm sure. But it was quite the adventure day. We met on a plane, where all good friendships start, right?
Well, the conversation was so unbearable that you literally had to get off the plane and go to Omaha to get out of there, apparently. And it was so funny because we had like a big, my dad's side of the family is a big extended, my dad was one of 8 siblings. We had this huge family tailgate the day before for the Minnesota game. As you said, it was an early game. So my uncle and I literally got there. It was still dark out. I think it was before 6 a.m. So we got, our fan related activities were pretty aggressive on Saturday. So I got on the plane, Taylor, like I think I had like a gigantic breakfast sandwich. And then I remember I was like reading all my Husker coverage, just not paying attention to anything. And then they started announcing the mechanical delays. And I think there was there was a lot of swearing involved, and we just started talking, but
we were commiserating for our pain of having to wait to get home.
Exactly. But then I, appreciated, I just had all kinds of Cubs related question, and I'm glad you brought that up. So, this is a Nebraska football podcast. the board of directors has approved, if there's time, the Common Fan board of directors has approved some Cubs related questions at the end, if that would be acceptable to you, Taylor.
That would be acceptable. Can't wait.
All right. Outstanding. So where will you find yourself this weekend, Taylor? Like, are you every weekend, are you somewhere different doing a college and or XFL game?
Sure am. So in the fall, college football, and in the spring, XFL. Every weekend, somewhere different. We usually don't find out until Sunday where we're going the next Saturday. So this Saturday, I'm headed down to Gainesville to do Arkansas, Florida. I am actually a graduate of the University of Arkansas, so having the chance to cover my alma mater is always special. And then my dad actually coached college football at Florida and got his MBA from there. Cool. Time to Gainesville. So it's a fun matchup for me, just some personal connections. And it's always fun to be in the SEC and looking forward to it.
That's so cool. So for any given game, any given Saturday, how much prep, for the broadcast teams like you're a part of, how much goes into that one game? Like, how early do you get on site, in town? How many coaches and players do you talk to? Like, can you give our fellow Common fans a little insight into what that's like? Because I'm guessing it's hard for you to like watch everything that's going on every weekend in college football. And so there's probably like a almost like studying for finals every week when you're drilling down and preparing for a game.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I mean, certainly you have your eyes on the big picture of college football and the big stories that are happening. But at the end of the day, I work on Saturdays, so I don't have the chance to watch every single game that's happening. So usually, I'll do the game Saturday, fly out either Saturday night or Sunday morning. And we'll get, if it's Sunday morning, I'll land back in Chicago and I'll get an email from our bosses and they'll tell us where we're going the next Saturday. And then really from that point, the first thing I usually do is I send an email to the respective SIDs, which if you're not familiar with an SID, it's a sports information director, and they're kind of in charge of being the liaison between the media and the team, and set up a call with those guys. And they're kind of my first point of, all right, let's go through the storylines. I'll kind of go over big picture stuff online, check their record, check what they did last game. And then the SIDs are super helpful in really dissecting the things that are happening within the program. And in those conversations, I will also set up calls with players on the team. So I try to usually talk to 2 guys on offense, 2 guys on defense from every team. And so when you figure both teams, it's about 8 players. And then I get on site and we'll talk to the head coach and both coordinators. But yeah, as far as preparation, I usually on Mondays try to go back and watch the games from Saturday, both teams' games, kind of flip through those. There is a website that we can access through ESPN, which is all 22. So you can kind of see a lot more of, plays they're running, styles of offense, defense, and that kind of stuff. So I do flip through stuff like that. But for me, I like to listen to what the announcers had to say about the programs to kind of get a gist of storylines and everything. And then from there, read as much as you can. I'm big on context. So, I can read, okay, well, Florida has given up 15 sacks. Okay, well, what is 15 sacks in the relation to the rest of the SEC? Is that good, bad, indifferent? Because you don't always know that off the top of your head. So I always try to figure out where they rank within the context of the conference and then of the FBS. And that gives me a picture of kind of what we're dealing with. And then you form your storylines and you have your calls players and get, questions in. And then I usually travel Thursday night to the site, wake up Friday. We'll meet with coaches Friday. Usually the home team, it's in the afternoon. And then the visiting team, it's at the hotel on Friday night. Some crews will do Zooms. That's one thing that changed after COVID, a lot more Zooms. My crew this year, we still love the in-person meetings. So we've done a lot of in-person meetings on Friday, and then usually a production meeting on Friday night or Saturday morning to go over kind of the elements we have for the game, the open, the things we want to talk about. And then boom, it's game time. You do the game and then, rinse and repeat for the next week.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, you just mentioned stories there. And I know a lot of sideline reporters have like quote unquote human interest stories that maybe you have something that would be good for the audience to know about a specific player on any given day. Some of those are feel good stories. Some of them can be kind of sad or even emotional. Are those stories that are provided to you by the university for the school that you're covering on that week? Or is that something that you as a reporter have to come up with that information yourself and kind of do your own due diligence?
I would say 95% of the time it's me coming up with the story.
Wow. Okay.
Sometimes, my producer or somebody from the school will be like, hey, I got this story. And they'll tell it to you. But for the most part, it's me coming up with that stuff. Every reporter you'll talk to is different. I'm really big on eyes and ears on the sideline. So I do come up with stories throughout the week, background, like we had the TCU game a couple weeks ago and Josh Hoover was in his second start. And so in a way, we're introducing him to the world. Not a lot of people knew who Josh Hoover was. Still probably don't know that much because he's relatively new in his college career. So at that point, to me, that's when those human interest stories really play because fans want to know, who is this guy?
Right.
What's he like?
So, no, sorry, go ahead, Taylor, go ahead.
Oh, well, and so, but I just think the big part of what I can do and what I can bring is stuff from the sidelines, because at the end of the day, I'm the only one down there and I'm the only one who sees things and hears things. And so I feel like my biggest impact on the broadcast is stuff that I learn on the sidelines, and I can tie it into the way the guys are talking in the booth, and then hopefully give context to the game and help fans at home understand what's going on the field.
That's amazing. So like, Billy Bob Lineman started a nonprofit to save the spotted owl or something. The SIDs don't try to feed you that stuff?
Certainly there are. And I will say,
yeah,
every SID is different. Some are really, really good, and some will, feed you all sorts of stuff. I have to shout out Mark Cohen at TCU. He's one of the best in the business. I mean, that guy, you bring up a guy who started 15 years ago at TCU and he'll be like, well, did you know this, and this? I'm like, your knowledge of this program is amazing. And there's certainly ones who will spoon feed you all sorts of information, which is helpful. Some aren't as helpful. That's the reality of, life. And so it just kind of depends week to week. I think at this point in the season, going into week 10, a lot of those human interest stories have been told, so they're not as prevalent because, again, I don't want to be telling a story that the fans have heard 15,000 times again, like this guy has a nonprofit. That's great. But I've also heard that story 15 times. I don't need to hear it again in a November game where, the stakes are higher than they were in September. So I kind of try to take all those things into consideration.
Okay. So have you done a lot of games in Lincoln?
I've only done one.
Okay. One. Okay. And then I guess with the new media rights deal, do you not do Big Ten games anymore?
No,
bummer.
It no longer has the rights. I know. So I'm
ridiculous.
Really glad I got at least one game there. Like I said, I have a lot of Husker fans who are friends of mine. One of my good friends' little brother works for the football program. And so, and I grew up in Colorado. I grew up on the Nebraska-Colorado rivalry. I was a Colorado State fan growing up. So I'm not going to, so we can get along here.
Well, Taylor, I don't know if you know this, the Nebraska Cornhuskers are currently 5-3. The Colorado Buffaloes are currently 4-4. I don't know if you knew that.
And I will say this, and Colorado fans are going to come at me for saying this, but I don't really care. I think if the TCU and Nebraska games are played right now, I think there's
different result. Yeah.
Thank you.
Especially the TCU game, because the poor Horned Frogs, they didn't know what they were jumping into, right? Like they are studying Tennessee. Are they studying Jackson State? Like what do you study to prepare for that game? They had no form of reference, and it was still a tight game. And so I think now with preparation, I think they win that game.
Yeah. And we brought it up on a previous pod too. You're spot on that was right in the middle of just Colorado fever at its highest point.
The coach,
everybody was salivating over him.
Coach,
so
I
agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Taylor, I want to know, you mentioned you were in Lincoln for a Saturday night. So I want to know what you did in Lincoln and what any Lincoln hot spots that you might have hit up when you were in town.
Well, I'm so glad you asked this question. So one of my friends, her friend's dad has a really nice apartment there, like a penthouse up in this. I didn't even know penthouses existed in Lincoln, but
They do?
Oh, they do.
they do. And this one was really nice. And so we went up there. There was a handful of people. And then last year, my analyst on my crew was Brock Osweiler. And Brock had a bunch of friends with Nebraska connections who were there. They were also in said apartment building and in a different apartment. Our groups ended up combining, and we were in some, again, like bougie apartment in Lincoln. I didn't know those existed, but they do. And we were having a great time. We were able to watch some later college football games, consume some adult beverages. And then everybody starts to get hungry. And I was there with my friends' parents, who all are Cornhuskers, go to every single game. One of my best friends, her parents now live in Ginger Cove, which is, I think, about 45 minutes from Lincoln, and they go to all the games. And so, they're the OGs. I consider the OGs of Lincoln. They took me to Lee's Chicken. Have you ever been?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
That's a staple.
Lee's Chicken
That is
on a
so
Saturday
awesome.
night. Don't sleep on that. We had a great time.
Did they have, was the organ player there playing the organ? Sometimes they have like an older gal that'll play some organ tunes there at least.
I don't remember that. I just remember it was me, my friend Mackenzie, and all the adults, and we were having the time of our life. Be
honest. When
great.
you pulled up to that place, you definitely thought you were in danger, didn't you? I'm all about local flavor. Let's experience stuff that maybe if you're just popping through Lincoln, you don't experience. And so when they took me there, a little bit of a drive from town, if you will. And it was great. So I loved it. I would go back. 10 out of 10. Recommend.
Awesome. Way to go, Geoff. There goes our sponsorship.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry, Lee's.
Jeez,
Sorry, Lee's.
I guess
it does. When
Yeah.
and he's got a point though. When you pull into the Lee's parking lot, you're kind of wondering, is this going to be some delicious fried chicken, or am I going to get murdered? So, no, but
Taylor,
that's got to be.
How long did you have feet on the ground in Lincoln before you realized this is the greatest college football program in history?
Well, honestly,
was it an hour, 2 hours?
I hate to break your sweethearts here.
Oh.
I'm such a sucker for the moment. I'll go to different schools, and with recency bias, I will be like, this is the greatest place on earth. I mean, I did the Florida State game last year. Doak Campbell on a Friday night after Thanksgiving. Florida State, I mean, they've had a phenomenal year, and really that was kind of the pinnacle of last season. I mean, I was like, this place is the greatest place on earth. And then, I had a phenomenal time in Lincoln, and I would honestly say that was my favorite game day experiences last year. And then, I did the upset of Texas A&M when they were the number 5 team in the country of App State, and fans were so mad, but I loved it because that's what makes college football so great, is the passion that comes along with loving a team so much on a Saturday. And I was like, College Station might be low-key one of the coolest places in the world because of what exists here in Texas A&M. And the 12th man, as an Arkansas grad, I never thought I would say that, but now as a member of the media, unbiased, I really do get sucked into every Saturday, and you just fall in love with the pageantry and the pride of each program. And they're all different. And Lincoln's certainly up there with the sellout crowds, and the passion is unmatched by a lot of schools. So I had a great time. There.
Well, Taylor, you mentioned being at Doak, being at A&M, you've been to Lincoln. You probably, you've been to some of the best college football stadiums in the country. And I mean, you regularly, are on the hallowed ground at Wrigley, right? I'm kind of somebody that's obsessed with stadiums, baseball stadiums, football stadiums. What, in your opinion, what is the best stadium that you've been to? And sidebar, the most unique stadium, because those can be kind of two different things.
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I mean, I'm not just saying this because I'm with you guys. Nebraska is special. Nebraska really is special because you're going to go there and you're going to have a sold out crowd. So I'm biased as a reporter, this field setup. There's a lot of really great stadiums that are awful. I was just at Oklahoma State. I really enjoyed my time in Stillwater. I'm a big fan of what Mike Gundy has done there for years at Oklahoma State and what he's built there. I hate working there. It's awful. It's so tight on the sideline. You can't move.
Sure.
And so again, that goes into the way I experience a stadium. So Lincoln is great because there's a ton of room. On the side, which is, A+ as a reporter. Really loud, so it's harder to hear conversations. That makes it more difficult. But that's what, as a fan, that's what you want. And I did get to shoot the hot dog thing.
Oh, der Wiener Schlinger.
Nice.
Mine went out of the stadium.
Oh, nice.
Wow. That's incredible.
So it was a good time. I'm trying to think where else. So yeah, Nebraska really is up there. I'm excited to experience Gainesville. It'll be my first time at the Swamp.
For
so
sure.
Yeah.
I'll stay tuned about that. I love the game day atmosphere at Ole Miss. I think it's the best tailgate in college football.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Because it's all concentrated. With most stadiums, they're kind of around the stadium. And so it's harder to get a feel for how many people are there because at one point in time, what's like, right? I think, is it the Champions parking lot right behind?
Yeah. Champions Club in Nebraska. Yeah.
Champions Club.
Yeah.
Right
across
that
the
was
street.
my friend tailgated. So it's like, okay, you might be looking at that and it's packed full of people, but then you can't see everybody else around the stadium. At Ole Miss, you can see everybody there in, a 180 view. And so it just feels magnificent.
And isn't Ole Miss like really fancy about their tailgates too, like white linen tablecloths and stuff like that?
Chandeliers, you got it.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, heels, dresses, all the things. That's across the South. I would say across the SEC, that is a standard. I would say when it's warm, most girls wear dresses, and Ole Miss is probably a little fancier. You're getting heels from the girls and all the things, but Ole Miss is a good time. Unfortunately I never made it to the Big House or the Shoe, and probably won't in the foreseeable future with ESPN not having the rights to the Big Ten. So I never got to experience those places, but I've heard those are great too.
It's overrated.
Look, you got to Lincoln. Okay.
Looking like a true Cornhusker.
Exactly.
Yep. I had a question for you, actually, that you mentioned sidelines and it being so tight at some stadiums and Nebraska being a little bit more wide open. Is there anything crazy that's ever happened to you on the sideline? Like, I'm a big guy that gets on Twitter and I see somebody get smoked with a football on the sideline, or a play goes out of bounds and hits somebody. Has anything like that happened, or anything?
Or did you jump? Did
close?
you bump into Connor Stallions in disguise?
Yeah.
I might not have known it was him.
Right.
In disguise. I have never, let's knock on wood here, been hit by a play as it's sort of ending like Laura Rutledge did a couple years ago at the Swamp.
Yeah.
My producer always, if I have my back to the field about to do a hit, like make sure you're watching. He doesn't like to do anything where it's, any sort of inherent risk there. I'm just thinking about this. Where were we? Oh gosh, it was this year. Might have been Oklahoma. And I wasn't paying attention, and Oklahoma's sidelines are tight too. And towards the end of the bench is where the kickers warm up. And I was standing towards the end of the bench, facing the bench, and the kicker is facing this way, kicking into the little net at the end. He didn't see me, and he totally backed up into me and stepped on my heel. And I still have a nice little scar on my heel from that was in September. So I guess that's really probably the only thing that's totally on me. I was in his way, was not paying attention. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Good. I'm glad
Oh,
they're
that's
safe.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, you're putting yourself in harm's way to bring the American people the game that they love. So God bless you for it. Now it's interesting, Taylor, doing both college football and Major League Baseball. Have you heard that everyone is now referring to Michigan as the Michigan Astros? Were you aware of that?
No, but it's funny. Let's just dive right into this subject. I'm gonna
Let's do it.
So, okay. Here's my take. I've heard so many people when it comes to what Michigan is being accused of doing with Connor Stallions, going to different stadiums, recording teams, trying to steal signs, that, well, everybody's doing that. Guess what? I don't care that everybody's doing it. At the end of the day, it is still breaking the rules. This is the same thing that happened with the sign stealing with the Astros. There was a lot of people around Major League Baseball. Well, everybody's doing it. Well, guess what? Until somebody gets punished tremendously for doing it, it's not going to stop.
Right.
It's same thing with steroids. Well, everybody was doing it. Well, at the end of the day, you're still breaking the rules. So I don't really care if everybody was doing it. You got caught and you're going to have to pay the consequence to set the tone for the rest of the sport to therefore stop this moving forward. Because if you don't, it's never going to stop. And so it's unfortunate in some ways, because I do understand what people are saying. Well, everybody's doing it, but at the end of the day, they still broke the rules, and I don't really care that everybody was doing it.
It's a childish response. It sounds like something a kid would say when they get in trouble. Well, everybody else is doing it. Don't get mad at me. Well,
like,
guess what?
Growing up,
Michigan, if every other team jumps off a bridge, you're going to do that too. That's something my
That's
parents
what my mom used to say. That's what my mom used to
a good
say.
parent.
Well, they did it. Well, would you follow them if they jumped off a bridge?
Right.
Well,
but also, like, is every team, I mean, that's drip that's coming out of about Michigan, of going to buying tickets to other teams' games, recording them. We're talking about electronic surveillance here. I mean, Connor Stallions might have a second career in the CIA or something. And then this thing today that he may or may not have been in disguise on Central Michigan's sideline for the CMU Michigan State game. First of all, I agree with you, Taylor. It doesn't matter if everyone's doing it. It's against the rules. Second of all, I don't think everyone's doing that stuff. Yeah. Maybe, I mean, are we
on that level?
No, I think they're
about that,
they're stealing. I think people are stealing signs, but I don't think they're going to those lengths of buying tickets at other stadiums and electronic surveillance. Like, I mean, even I think Matt Rule even referenced it as like, yeah, we definitely try to figure out what those signs mean when they're calling on the field. If they're doing like this on the sideline, we kind of want to try to figure out what that means. But I don't think anyone's doing it to this length. And if they are,
exactly,
then, who knows? But
there's no way to know,
right?
There's no real way to know. If I had to guess, I would assume there probably are more programs, but I don't know that to be factual. Yeah. So the reality is Michigan broke the rules, and there should be a punishment for breaking the rule. Because if there's not, then what stops other teams from doing it moving forward?
I also just don't understand. I thought this with the Astros too. Like, okay, like you said, Matt, if you're on the field and it's like, okay, every time someone yells Bronco, they're running the ball to the right or something. That's one thing. You share, right. You share that information with your teammates. Or like if a pitcher's tipping his pitches and the guy comes into the dugout, he says, hey guys, he's doing X, Y, or Z when he throws the curveball. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't understand, as competitors, as guys who, put everything into this, doesn't it then just feel hollow when you win? Like, I don't understand going to this extent to steal signs. Like, I don't understand the joy in that, or the value. Like I would be, if I was, I've thought about this about the Astros too. Like, do you really look at that World Series ring proudly when you know what you were doing? Like, to me, it's like, why are you even doing this? I don't know. Maybe that's Pollyanna-ish or something, but it just seems like whether Harbaugh, who knows, remains to be seen if Harbaugh knew or knows or doesn't. He seems like the last guy who would want to win that way. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. Taylor's got to be careful here on this.
Sure. Well, maybe we could get Tyler from Spartanburg to weigh in on this. And anybody here
jump on in. The water is not fine with what you're saying to Dabo Swinney. he took serious offense to that. As would I if somebody came at me and said it. And I loved what Dabo Swinney said, when the expectation outlasts the appreciation. And I see it across sports. There's no doubt about it. I remember, different example, but I covered a couple FCS football games throughout the years because throughout the playoffs, they're on ESPN. North Dakota State has been a power in the FCS for several years. And I remember talking to some of their players, and it's like they don't feel like the fans appreciate it anymore because they had won so much. And so now when you win, you don't appreciate it. But then when you lose, it's like the world is coming down. And it's like, well, what's the point of doing all this if you're not going to enjoy the good parts, which the good part is winning. So I'm a big fan of Dabo Swinney and the way he goes about his business. And so I loved his response. I was totally for it. And he was so accurate in the things he pointed out. I mean, Clemson this year, they haven't had a good year, and he acknowledged that. But at the end of the day, their track record over the last decade has been really, really good. And if you can't appreciate that, then you are part of the problem.
Right. Well, I think as Husker fans, we can absolutely 100% relate to fans getting absolutely spoiled for an extended period of time, to the point where if you have a 500 record in the season, it's grounds for firing all of a sudden.
It's possible Husker fans have gone overboard from time to time with the expectation.
Maybe
take it from us, Tyler in Spartanburg. Embrace the guy who's won you 2 national titles in 7 years, because you don't know what that unknown is. Sometimes, maybe even often, not what you think it's going to be. So stick with the guy who's won you. I love that Dabo had some stuff right off the top of his head, whatever it was, 12 consecutive seasons of 10 or more wins, or just something totally insane like that. I can tell you, Husker Nation at this point would be dancing in the streets with the situation.
Right. Well, I've always looked at him as like he came in. I think that was the same year as Bo Pelini, and the same year, like maybe 1 year difference, because then we played him in, I think it was the Gator Bowl.
Oh, that's right. In about
Bo's first bowl game.
08,
and so I mean, he's still there. He's still plugging away. He's won some national championships and had a really good. I mean, that would be a good career for somebody, just what he's done at Clemson. So yeah, Clemson fans need to relax a little bit. We've seen the other side.
Take it from Husker fans.
Stick with it.
Yeah. We're celebrating all the W's here on the Common Fan podcast these days. Right. We're not complaining. We're not complaining about ugly wins. We're not complaining about 5-3 records or anything like that. Actually, pending the Michigan investigation, we could be 6-2. That's a side point. So Taylor, I mean, who do you think? Is it Georgia and everybody else right now? I mean, I feel like in college football, we've had these. I mean, the Huskers were one of them. 3 national titles in 4 years in the 90s. In kind of the early to mid 2000s, maybe it was USC. Then obviously Alabama went on their unprecedented run. And suddenly now it feels like Georgia has kind of has that number 1 spot. Do you feel like anybody can stop them this year? Do you feel like that's kind of a well-oiled machine that everybody's going to be working to catch up to now for the time being?
Okay. I was a little bit of a Georgia doubter 2 weeks ago, because they haven't really beaten anybody. They beat Kentucky. They beat South Carolina. South Carolina hung in with them at the half. They had a favorable win over Kentucky. And I wasn't sure how much, how good they really were. Now, you can't really dethrone back-to-back national championship winners without any losses and, still having a really talented roster. But I felt there were other teams across college football, Michigan, Ohio State. I mean, Washington, what they're doing out on the West Coast has been undeniable, that I thought, okay, well, maybe this is the year that somebody else comes in and takes a hold of college football. And before 2 weeks ago, there were teams who I thought had more impressive wins, who still do have more impressive wins. But again, I mentioned I have Florida this weekend, and I watched that Florida-Georgia game, and whoa, that was the best Georgia's looked all season to me in the games that I've watched. And the talent level, the difference in the talent from Georgia to Florida is obvious. They're an incredibly talented team without their best player in Brock Bowers. They made it look like this is no big deal. So right now, yes, they are the kings of college football and they are the team to beat. But I will say they have a big test this weekend in Mizzou. I know Mizzou has to go to Athens, but Missouri is a really talented football team. And I'm excited for that matchup. The week after that, they have Ole Miss. And then, they don't get any breathers. They have to go to Tennessee. And so I am interested and excited to watch the rest of the season for Georgia, because there's no doubt these 4 weeks are the toughest weeks of their schedule. So yes, I truly believe they are still the king of college football, but I think at the end of these 4 weeks, we'll know if that's the case or not.
Yeah, they're definitely going to have to earn it. And you mentioned the Florida Georgia game, and you're going to be in Gainesville this weekend. I think that when you see people in Gainesville, you should mention to them the 1996 Fiesta Bowl when Nebraska dismantled them 62-24. I think people want to hear that from you this weekend.
Yeah, I'm sure they want to hear that. I'll definitely bring that up.
Just keep that in mind. Yep.
Yeah. And then they'll remind me, well, who's the last school to win a national title? Was it Florida or was it Nebraska? And then, then they actually have a response.
Well, we're on our way back, Taylor. We're on our way back. That's a running theme of this podcast is we're on our way back.
Our future is bigger than our past, Taylor. We just keep telling ourselves that our future is bigger than our past.
Yep.
I mean,
it's all about hope in college football.
Any team would have struggles like we do when you're not only trying to win football games, but you're battling the college football industrial complex. It's just taking us a little longer to get there. That's all.
You have bigger things that need to be taken care of in
The
comparison.
college football industrial complex loves that we've been down and they've kicked us while we're down, but we're going to overcome it.
I can't wait.
Now, Taylor, you are an Arkansas grad. Were you there when current Big Ten coach Bret Bielema was there?
Yeah, I was there for some interesting years in Arkansas football. So I was there with Bobby Petrino my freshman year.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
You'll remember Bobby
Petrino.
Oh, yeah.
Motorcycle in the spring of 2012, which was my freshman year of college.
Oh, wow. Yep.
So, we were winning, had a chance to go to a national championship game my freshman year if we beat LSU the day after Thanksgiving. We ended up losing that game, but played in the Sugar Bowl that year, had a phenomenal season. And you think Arkansas football is on the up and up. The crash happens in John L. Smith, who was the coach for a year, interim coach. And then comes our friend Bret Bielema. He was there from 2013 to 2017. So not only was I there as a student when he was hired, I was also there on the day that he was fired when I was working in Little Rock as a reporter. So that was one of the first big moments of my television career, was walking out of the stadium. And I don't know if you remember, but he was quote unquote informed that he was fired, literally walking off the field. And so I had to go on the newscast, the top of the show, and say, well, we just learned that Bret Bielema was fired, and it was breaking news and a lot of fun. And but honestly, I have a great relationship with Bielema. He's a Cubs fan. He grew up in Illinois, obviously.
Oh, cool.
At Illinois. So I have respect for what he did at Wisconsin. Unfortunately, it never stuck at Arkansas, but he's had a little bit of success at Illinois. Not the season they would have dreamt of in Champaign this year, but
well, they ran into the big red buzzsaw. I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. Yeah.
I mean, the Huskers went to Champaign, fake Memorial Stadium. They tried to set the stadium on fire the week before we played. And, we went in there and kind of won that game in dominating fashion, just in case any of the common fan listeners have forgotten that.
And then they left with their champagne and toasted on the plane right back to Lincoln. And it was a great game.
Wow. Nice. Yes,
indeed.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed.
Exactly. So that's cool. So did you always, you mentioned right out of school, you were doing sports reporting in Little Rock. Is that kind of going into college? Did you know this is what you wanted to do? You always wanted to do sports broadcasting. Like how did you get to where you are now?
So I wanted to be in the CIA. So I was
no way.
A freshman or sophomore in college or in high school. I wanted to be in the CIA. I was serious enough about it that my parents were able to put me in contact with a guy who was an active agent. And he came over and talked to me, and it was fascinating. I wasn't allowed to know his real name, but he was, it was amazing. And I was fascinated by it. And I remember him telling me, if you choose this profession, you probably sacrifice having a family. You could, but it's really challenging as a female to get married and have children in this profession. When you're gone for lengthy amounts of time, you can't tell what your family where you are and all these different things. And so I remember thinking, okay, well, I think this would be really cool, but I also do want a family one day. And so at the time, Carissa Thompson, who's now with Fox Sports, Carissa was the reporter for the Colorado Rockies, and I grew up in Denver, and so I would watch the Rockies every night and saw her on TV and thought, okay, well, that job looks pretty fun. And that was kind of where my hopes and dreams of being a sports reporter started. And then from there, at the time, Erin Andrews was on College Game Day, and so she was really the face of sideline reporters at ESPN and in college football. At the time, Tracy Wolfson as well. And so kind of switched paths and thought, all right, I want to get serious about this. And when I was choosing schools, I decided between Texas and Arkansas. I was actually born in Fayetteville. My dad got his doctorate from Arkansas. So that's what I ended up going there. But I thought long and hard about Texas because Texas was launching the Longhorn Network at the time, which would have been great for upcoming and aspiring broadcasters. And so I went into college knowing this is what I wanted to do. And that's really where I fell in love with the idea of doing sideline reporting for college football. I grew up in Colorado. My dad played at Colorado State, and I grew up on the CU-CSU rivalry, but it's different than the South, and it's different than the SEC. And when I went down, again, my freshman year, we were number 3 in the country, really good, sold out crowds. And I was like, this is what I want to do. Did all of the stuff in college, all the internships, whatever. My first job out of college was actually in Casper, Wyoming, at Market 196, doing local news. And when I was at Wyoming, Josh Allen was at the University of Wyoming.
Oh,
so
cool.
got really fortunate to cover him during his time there. Logan Wilson, a phenomenal linebacker for the Bengals, was also in Laramie at the time. So they had a good program and some, really big stars now in the NFL. And then got the job in Little Rock. I was there for under a year, and then the Rockies job came open, moved back to Denver to do that job. And then the Cubs job came open, and I got the Cubs gig, and I've been doing ESPN stuff since 2019, which was my second year with Colorado. So there's my bio, and I'm,
that is so cool.
But yeah, that was a journey.
Awesome.
Taylor, do you have any aspirations to do any like studio work? Like, you're doing really well, obviously, now doing sideline stuff and on-field reporting with college football and the Cubs. Do you have thoughts or like ideas of things that you would want to do moving forward? Have your own show or be the host of a show in studio or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. Studio is something that I definitely want to dive more into. I have gone up to MLB Network a couple times to guest host some MLB Tonights and some of their other shows, and I've really enjoyed it. I also will host some pre and post games for the Cubs on Marquee from time to time, and I'm hosting a weekly Bear show right now, so it's been fun to kind of dive into.
Cool.
But it's fun to have more of a voice. Reporting is really great, and I don't think most people understand how much goes into the job, because at the end of the day, you hear us for 30-second tidbits, but we do so much that impacts the broadcast. And, we have to know just as much as everybody else. We just don't have the payoff of our, we're not talking the whole time. So it's a lot of work. It challenges me still, which I enjoy, but I look forward to getting more reps and more opportunities to host in studio. Because I do think it gives more of a voice. And especially for me in baseball, I've really enjoyed learning the sport and telling different sides of baseball that not everybody, the casual fan might not know. And I want to help the casual fan become a diehard fan. And I think, again, studio allows more of a voice to do that. So the answer to your question is yes, I do have dreams and aspirations of hopefully more studio work.
I love that. Help the casual fan become a diehard fan. I love that. That's so cool.
That's a good
well, line. So guys, we want to be respectful of your time, Taylor. I would love, since we got approval from the Common Fan Board of Directors, I'd love to ask you a handful of Cubs questions. Matt or Geoff, you got Matty O is giving us the thumbs down.
Taylor, I'm a third generation Cardinals fan. So, I do love Wrigley. I do believe, oh God. Taylor, we don't need to go there, but I do appreciate and respect the Cubs organization and Wrigley Field. But when they play the Cardinals, it's I've got a one-track mind. I'm all Cardinals, all Redbirds, baby.
I appreciate that. And it's what makes my job so much fun is there is a true hatred between the Cubs and the Cards. And again, I like to be a part of things that people are passionate about, and people are passionate about that rivalry. And so I have so much respect for the fact that you are a Cardinals fan, because it's what makes being a Cubs reporter enjoyable to experience that rivalry.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm curious, Taylor, it's a unique, I feel like, situation when you have the team that the marquee team that does the broadcast game. So Boog and JD and you, and then there's some others who are in there from time to time as well. You guys are all pros. I mean, we watch a ton of Cubs baseball in my house. My boys are 9 and 6. And I mean, in the summer, they're like, can we turn the Cubs on? Can we turn the Cubs on? We watch the Cubs all the time. So you guys are all pros, you're experienced reporters, but I feel like when you are with a specific team, like you're that team's reporter, you can be a little bit of a fan, right? I mean, right. Like when Boog is calling a game-winning home run or something, he can get excited and he can say Cubs win and he can say, sing the song and fly the flag and all those things. But is there a push and a pull there where you're trying to maintain some level of neutrality as a reporter, and yet you're on the Cubs beat, you travel with the team, you interview these guys all the time, you're following, I mean, they were in the playoff race well into September, as that painful as that is for me to bring up. Like, is there a push and a pull there, or what's that dynamic like?
Certainly, no doubt. And I think you look at the history of the Cubs organization and the great Harry Carey, there's no questions about it. He was a Cubs fan, and the way he called games, he called them as a fan. And that's what made people fall in love with him. And so I respect the history there. And I respect the fact that that's in part what the fans want. And so I do believe that we do that. And, but I also believe in the value of our journalistic integrity and understanding that it's not always peaches and roses, and having the lens on enough as a journalist where you can understand when things are not going well, because, it's like if I'm your friend and I tell you how great everything is all the time, well, when I actually mean something's great, you don't really hear me the same way, because I am always telling you how everything's great. And it didn't matter if I didn't actually believe it was great, I was still telling you it was great. So you don't believe me as much if I really do believe something's great. And I think that's the same approach we kind of take with the broadcast. Is it's important to still have a journalistic approach and a credibility, so that when we tell you things are good, you actually believe it, because we haven't just been telling you things were good even when things were bad. So I think there's a balance that comes with it. But to say that we're fans is, I don't know if I love the word fan, but I think there's an element of we want to cover a team that is good and a team that wins. So yes, there's certainly a balance between the two.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really cool. Will the Cubs re-sign Cody Bellinger?
That's the question everybody wants to know, and I can't sit here and tell you I have the answer to that. I believe he's with Scott Boras, and I believe Scott Boras is in control of those negotiations, and I believe he's going to want as much money and as many years as possible. And I don't know if the Cubs will be willing to give him what he might be able to get with another team.
Pay the man, Tom. Pay the man. Tom Ricketts, the Ricketts family, they're from Nebraska. We can't confirm this. They're probably common fan listeners. So, Tom, please. Pay the man.
And this is the part where maybe it's the part of me where I can be more of a journalist is I don't believe it's in the best interest of the club to give a guy the 10 million or a 10-year deal worth X amount of million when maybe his value, he might play center field for 2 more years, and then you're going to have PCA there who's going to be a better center fielder. So then you have to move him to first. And then his value decreases. And I don't want to, but you know how it is. Center field, an elite center fielder is more valuable than,
Sure.
And so, and the future of the Cubs in maybe 4 to 5 years, maybe that's their peak window. And if that's the back end of when somebody's good, but then you still have to pay him for 5 more years, I don't know if it's economically smart. So I don't know the answer, but I'm just saying I really do believe Jed will have a lens on, like, they're going to pay people. It's just a matter of having a smart deal. And that's what I just want to send home with Cubs fans. It's like, just because, we can't, I just don't want to push out the narrative that, Tom's being cheap because they don't re-sign Cody Bellinger. No, I believe that they probably offered him what they really valued him to be worth, but they're not going to overpay him because ultimately in the long term, it's not a smart deal.
Well, yeah, you rarely see those 8, 9, 10-year deals like work out. And sometimes they stop working out at like year 5 or something like that,
Yeah,
and so
Anaheim, it never worked with him in Anaheim.
I think Bobby Bonilla is still getting paychecks every year or something.
So there's certainly examples of it all across baseball. And so we'll see. I really enjoyed covering Cody. I would love to have him back in Chicago. But I also, for him, go get the best deal you possibly can. That's what I would do if I was the player. Yep. So we'll see.
Awesome. Well, Matt, Jeff, any other questions for Taylor?
No, I do actually.
Oh,
I do have one more.
I do have one more.
Geoff and Lincoln has a question.
I just have to ask. I used to travel to Chicago every other week, so I basically felt like I live there. So I've been to Wrigley. I've experienced the culture. One thing I've noticed being out there is it does seem like I do see a lot of Irish gear. I mean, I went to the Notre Dame bookstore on Michigan Avenue. Beautiful place, by the way. But I just got to ask, you being in the Chicago area, how much do you love Notre Dame and why are they so awesome?
Before you answer that, Taylor,
don't answer that, Taylor.
We have a standing rule. We don't discuss the Irish at the table. However, because we have a guest here today, I think the board will understand when we allow for an answer here. So go ahead.
Here's my answer.
Thank you.
Fine.
I am not going to answer my affinity or lack thereof for the University of Notre Dame, but I will tell you, I am very, very good friends with Mike Golick Jr., who without a doubt is the biggest Irish fan I've ever come into contact with.
I hung out with him at a tailgate when I went to the Notre Dame USC game in 2017. Like a penthouse on campus with him, Golick Sr., his wife, their whole family. That phenomenal. Is awesome. Yeah, they're great people.
Yeah. They're phenomenal. And so for his happiness, I want the Irish to do well because I respect him and admire him greatly. And that's all I'll say about that.
Geoff, you've exhausted
you've
exhausted your Notre Dame allowance for like 3 years now. Just so you know.
Sorry.
That's enough, Jeff.
Well, Taylor, thank you so much for joining the Common Fans today. This was so much fun and so cool to get some of your backstory and then your insight into so many things that are going on in college football and Major League Baseball. So we just really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us.
Well, thanks for having me on. I mean, happy Halloween, trick or treat. What's your favorite Halloween candy? Do we like some Snickers, candy corn?
All of
you
it.
said it. I'm a Snickers guy. I'm absolutely
Snickers are disgusting. I'm gonna die on that hill.
Oh.
Sorry, that's for now.
That's the end of the podcast.
Well, thanks.
Jeff.
Thanks for coming, Jeff.
Way to go, Jeff.
With you guys.
Taylor, Jeff doesn't like anything, so don't listen to him.
Yeah.
Except Notre Dame.
We got into a whole 15 minutes on potlucks, and I've never met somebody who doesn't like a potluck. Geoff and Lincoln doesn't like potluck, so we're not going to go there. But he doesn't like potlucks. Add Snickers to the list. Go ahead, Jeff. Did you have something else to say, Jeff?
What else do you hate, Jeff?
No,
United States of America. If you don't like it, you can leave.
Well, thank you, Taylor, for being on. In all seriousness,
Yes.
this has been fascinating to me. Thanks for tolerating TJ on a flight, because we all hate that over conversational guy that you get stuck sitting next to. And the last thing you want to do is chat with somebody when you're probably hungover and just want to sleep or nap it out. So thanks for coming on. We really do appreciate it.
We really do, Taylor.
United for placing me next to TJ. Okay, I wouldn't have thought with the common fans
Right.
for TJ.
Exactly.
So,
Yep.
Thank you.
everything happens for a reason, guys.
That's
There you
right.
go.
Touché. Agreed.
Thank you, Taylor.
All right, Common fans, follow us on your streaming platform of choice. Follow us on all the social media outlets. Don't forget the Huskers kick off at 11 a.m. Central Time. Look for the roll call so you can tweet out a picture of wherever you're watching the game. And as always, GBR for life.
Go Big Red.